Folks, welcome back to another episode of Rants. If you're an old friend, you already know who I am. My name is Stefan Thuringer, and I'm your host here at Rants. If you're a new friend, welcome. And if you've listened to our podcast before, then I hope you're subscribed. If you have not and you're a new friend, besides that, this is season 2's introductory ooh, which is always the same song we start with. Hit that damn subscribe button. Today, we're going to be talking with somebody from the River Valley, New Jersey. That particular individual, she works under the title of Go Get a Guilt-Free Divorce. She also has titled it, I just gave you something, it's a lady we're talking to today, The Gray Divorce. It's shameless, and that's just, what we all need. And there's a funny side note for her. If Craigslist would have existed back then, she told me in confidence, I'm going to share it with the world now. She would have put her husband on Craigslist for, I think she said, a free giveaway. She's somebody who has got incredible energy. She is in her heritage from Puerto Rico. She's all about adversity and transformation. In her mind, negativity is out. In particular, as we're going into 2022, let's get the fucking negativity really out of here. She's also about to publish a book. And she's got a thing or two or three or five to say about what divorce really is. And she's with me right here. You're going to start seeing her. Welcome, 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 Sonia Frontera. Sonia, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the warm welcome. And I'm so excited to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
That's awesome. So, Sonia, tell me a little bit more, and not so much me. You've shared so much with me already. Super grateful for that. Tell us a little bit more, and the listeners, about who you are. What is your journey a little bit at a high level? And we want to dig a little deeper than anyways, but so people can understand who we are with guesting today.
Okay. Well, I'm a Jersey girl. I'm currently living in the Delaware Valley in New Jersey. I'm originally from Puerto Rico, like you said. And my journey starts out as a candy-ass girl, Catholic girl. Is it okay to say candy-ass on your show?
It is. You can say anything you want on my show.
All right. So I was like a super sheltered kid, and I came to the mainland when I was 17 to go to college. And I stayed in like a good Puerto Rican Catholic girl. I got married very young. I was 24. And then I discovered within 24 hours that I had married a psychologically abusive man. And that was, my first hard knock of reality as a young person. And that was kind of the beginning of a journey of transformation and evolving into the person that I am today. I'm currently an attorney. I practice law, and I'm an empowerment trainer and also an author, which was the dream I had since I was in high school.
I love that. So first off, sorry that you had obviously at an early age to go through that experience, because I think as we grow older and later age, we then realize all the significance such experiences and encounters and marriages in that instance certainly have in our later life, and what's kind of the operating system and the patterns we're learning there. Talking about that, tell us a little bit more. You said a few things here: empowerment trainer, you're an attorney, and people oftentimes, and that's what I really enjoyed about our conversation previously, when they hear attorney, they always hear, negativity. It's combative. It's But I get the sensation that for you, it's a little bit of a switch. When people work with you, or people, also the energy I get from you, it doesn't seem like you're, I'm going to rip your heart out individual. While you want justice, at the same time, it seems like you have a very altruistic, supportive philosophy about the way you practice.
Well, yeah, I consider myself a highly unconventional attorney. Most attorneys, they're very serious. They take themselves seriously. And I'm very lighthearted in my approach. And people like working with me for that reason. I think we should not take ourselves too seriously, just take our work seriously. So, I don't like working with attorneys as a client, but I love working as an attorney and helping people, because legal issues are very nerve-wracking. And you need someone who's supportive and compassionate
Yeah. Let's talk about this for a second. And I would imagine there's some great examples you have. And we probably have some people listening who are maybe in the middle of a divorce. Maybe they are, contemplating divorce. I think through COVID, again, another year of COVID and
Mm.
holidays. And as we're recording, we're just kind of in that transition from 21 to 22. I know you've shared with me that January is always kind of the moment where everybody wakes up and goes, I got to get out of this. I think you called it. What did you call January?
It's called divorce month.
The divorce month. So we're right before, as we're recording, divorce month, and timely in that respect, obviously. Let's talk about that a little bit. What happens? What's kind of the journey people go through, and what is, from a standpoint of expectation and somebody like you, what should people expect, and what are some of the resources potentially that you can also direct them to?
Yes, well, January is called divorce month because a lot of people wait until January, until after the holidays, to start filing for divorce. They don't want to ruin their holidays for their families, their kids, and so they wait. And come January, they start heading to the lawyers' offices. And now with COVID, a lot of people have been giving a lot of thought to divorce because it has made us confront the relationships and the amount of time with our partners and how we interact with them. So it has been reported around the world that because of COVID, a lot of couples have been filing for divorce. So when you are encountering that situation, it's very disconcerting because when we get married, we're just hoping for it to last forever. Nobody really gets married with the intention to get divorced. So it's a very difficult time in your life. And it's hard dealing with attorneys because it's a very difficult and intimidating process.
Right. What are some of the things you would say to somebody who is sitting there and saying, you know what, I'm afraid, I'm nervous, and I'm not meaning this in the context of domestic abuse. That's a whole other conversation, but
Hmm.
just in the context of the fear of making that first step.
Yeah.
What's a good? I don't know. Is it the word help? Is pointer? Is what's a good way of supporting people like that?
Well, I think the most important thing is to encourage people to give this a lot of thought and be sure when you take that step, and feel empowered to carry it out because it's very disempowering and not a good idea to go into this with feelings of ambivalence. So I think it's important for people to go for a consultation early on and talk to an attorney to understand what they can expect out of the process to and essentially just lose the fear of it. Have a little bit more of, information is power. If you understand what the process is like, what you can expect, and how a
Yeah.
lawyer is going to help you along the way, it just takes a little bit the fear of the divorce process takes the edge off it.
That's great. One of the expressions I've heard you talk about is the guilt-free divorce. Let's talk about that piece. When you say guilt-free divorce, what does that mean?
Well, we are both Catholic, and you know that we were raised to stay married, and divorce is very taboo in our religion, and we're made to feel guilty about it. And in fact, in many cultures, you just hear the word failure associated with divorce. Divorce is a failure. You failed as a person if you're divorced. And I really want to debunk those myths because divorce is not a failure, and it's not something that should give you guilt, feelings of guilt. This is something that should be a part of your personal evolution.
Yeah,
Understand where you're coming from, how you ended up in this place, and where you go from here. It's
I
about
love that.
moving forward. It's
Yeah,
not about
yeah.
looking back with regret, but in terms of how do we recreate our lives from this point on?
I think you're bringing up such a great point, and I think it's right, couples and relationship maintenance. We bring our car in every week or every month or every 2 months for an oil check and for an oil change and for a filter and this and that. Sometimes I wonder, and I had this conversation with somebody else who was on the podcast here, and allow me to mention her. I mentioned her to you, Elizabeth Earnshaw. And Elizabeth said, one of the things we never do is we actually do this checkup. And then suddenly we find ourselves 5, 6, 8 years down the road and we go, holy shit, I'm going to get divorced. I can't stand this person. It's not what I expected. It's changed. They have evolved. And sometimes I think people do, in fact, grow apart. How do you see in that context? You've been in this for a long time. You've observed that. You've have your own life experiences. And as you alluded to, so have I. But I think our generation and older they deal with divorce and coupleship and romance and marriage different than the generation who is like 1, 2, 3 behind us, right? We get like 5 generations in the world of being married almost now. And so, what do you see the evolution being there? And what are some of the tips, maybe, as you're kind of the one who comes to the crash site oftentimes? But is there things, and because you are in the coaching business as well, and you are in the support and the teaching business a little bit, are there things where you say, well, you know what, you could have done that differently, and you wouldn't be ending up in my office? Are there these moments where you go, they could have done that differently, and they wouldn't be here?
Yes, and there's all kinds of things that we could have done differently. And we should look at it not in terms of I screwed up or to berate yourself, but in terms of how could I do things differently and how could I do things better? And I think that before you go to the lawyer's office, you need to look at yourself and do some personal exploration. I think it's key, and understand how you ended up in this relationship, what keeps you in that relationship, and whether or not you and your partner can make the changes that are necessary to revamp that relationship. And if after doing all the emotional work, after doing the emotional inventory, you feel convinced that the relationship is not salvageable, then you owe it to yourself to end it as amicably as possible so you can both rebuild your lives.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, right? I think oftentimes in divorce, and I went through this myself. I think the first reaction is, the stages of grief, anger and sadness, and then I think the other thing we very, very quickly go to in relationships is blame, right? It's the other person's fault, instead of what I think I hear you say is self-reflection. What I hear you say is self-awareness, and exploring how did I and what did I contribute to ultimately getting us into the situation we're in, and what does that mean?
Exactly.
What are some of the things in terms of, maybe the not so good parts? I want to talk about that for a moment, and I want to acknowledge that there's also a lot of couples where on both sides, and we have all different sets of couples these days. It's not just male and female anymore. It's male and female and transgender, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of domestic violence that oftentimes comes in various flavors, and that can be everything from verbal abuse to physical. And can we talk about that a moment? And I don't even know in which direction to go here, because that's not a territory I'm very familiar with and B, particularly comfortable about. But you allowed me to bring it up, and I think you, somebody who has a little bit of a very different and a much more, complete perspective there. Can we talk about that for a moment, and maybe with some, helping people understand what it means and what are the boundaries they need to be setting, and if they're being violated, what's really the right thing and the wrong thing to do?
Yes, and that's a loaded topic, and it's very near and dear to my heart. I have been a domestic violence advocate for 28 years now, and it's a subject that it's very touchy and uncomfortable, right. And we're not comfortable discussing it, but it's so important to be aware of it. Yep. Did you know that 1 in every 4 women and 1 in every 7 men experience partner abuse in their lives?
I did not.
That is huge. It's a huge statistic.
Yeah. That is, it's 25% what you're telling me on the side of women, and a little bit less on the side of men. But I think the one piece, what's interesting to me, and I'm not saying this, and I don't want anybody to hear this, please, who's listening. I'm not saying this because I'm a man, but as guys, we don't think that we can ever experience domestic violence, because usually the traditionalist thinking is, if there's domestic violence, it's always the guy going after the woman, and she's the one who's the victim. And I think it's important to, as you just did, to point out that can go in all directions, and it's not just men towards women; it can be the other way around as well. And I think that's an important point to acknowledge, and also that hopefully can empower people to say, maybe that's what I'm experiencing.
Yes, absolutely. And it happens to same-sex couples as well. So no one is immune from it. So, think about this, Stefan. If you go into any room, any church, any family gathering, and you keep in mind the statistic that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men, that means somebody in that group is likely to be a victim of abuse, possibly yourself, without realizing it, because there's so many myths surrounding abuse, and we think it's all violence, but there's so many manifestations of abuse.
It's so
that we don't
interesting.
recognize. Hmm.
Yeah, you said that, right? I mean, literally, when you were saying the statistic, I'm like, oh my God. So if I walk into a room with 100 people, there is like quite a few women in there, like 4 to 6 women who've experienced it, and at least 3 to 4 men. And that's 10 people in a room of 100. And that's quite a number when you really think about it that way. And we don't talk about it enough.
No, we don't. And I think we need to start that conversation
Yeah, I
because
love that.
we need to have that conversation because once we have a deeper, clear understanding of what abuse is, what are the signs and what we can do about it, whether in our own relationships, but other people or as parents, how our behaviors are modeling our children and how they interact in their own
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, what are some of the resources if somebody is now listening to us and says, "Huh, I wonder if I'm experiencing this"? Are there some resources, some guidelines, some pointers where you say, well, and maybe it's just a few examples you can give us. Maybe there's some old cases you have where you say, you know what, I know this situation. Here's an example. If you experience A, B, C, and D, is it that simple to point out sometimes, or is it a lot more complicated? So I don't want to ask for something to oversimplify something that is really so complicated in the first place.
It is very complicated. And domestic abuse centers on power and control. And it's when one of the partners tries to control the other through
Mm.
various means. And it could be financial abuse, which I
Yeah.
learned recently is I recently published a booklet to educate people about domestic abuse. And financial abuse happens to be one of the most powerful and the hardest to detect of all forms of partner abuse. It could be sexual abuse, emotional, verbal. It could be gaslighting. There's so many different kinds of abuse. But what you need to keep in mind is how you feel. Your intuition will
Mm.
tell you. If your partner makes you feel bad about yourself, pay attention.
Yeah.
It's really key to pay attention. And if your partner tries to control you,
Mm.
tries to demean you, and most importantly, one of the telltale signs is isolating you from your support systems. When you have a
Mm.
partner that tries to keep you under their spell and prevent you or discourage you from spending time with your friends and family, that is a sign that you could be in an abusive situation. And to anyone who's not sure, find out, learn more about it. My go-to resource is the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is www.thehotline.org. And learn more. And you can access a counselor 24/7 confidentially, and they can help you understand if you find yourself in an abusive relationship and
Mm.
what you can do about it.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Say that again. So it's what?
Hotline.org.
Thehotline.org. And that's a free resource. Anybody who's listening, um, you know, I think we sometimes don't know. And I would also invite, listen, I for a while I called myself, and I own this piece, the recovering narcissist. And there's a part that I learned from my father. I mean, we talked about family patterns, where this an old personal assistant of mine, she made a funny joke out of it, but it probably wasn't that funny. I was on a telephone with somebody who worked for me, and I said to the guy who was my chief technology officer at the time, and I said, this is about me, 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 because I was the one who was the visionary behind it. And it was a terrible, terrible statement, but it really, and then she got me these little minions because they always say, me, 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 me. And every time that I was going down that road of too much here in my ego in the head, she would point at that little thing. And that's really, one of the things where as we get older, we start recognizing certain things, and we hopefully own some things. And in retrospect, we can then say, oh, wow, that's exactly what I did. So I had a few of those aha moments in my last 10 years where you kind of go, interesting. That's, the self-centeredness, the entitlement, et cetera, that all goes with that is not serving you and certainly not the people around you. So I would invite anybody who's listening who maybe has some of that, me, or whatever else it is, think about that piece as well. Any other in that context, any other tips, resources, which I know that's a dear subject, so I want to spend a little more time on that, and a dear subject to you. um, any other things that you can share that can help people listening?
Yes, I think it's really important to pay attention. Again, I'm huge with self-awareness, and try to pay attention to your dynamics with your partner, and start educate yourself. I really think, going to the hotline, and I also have my book that we can put on the show notes, which can give you a very brief overview of domestic abuse and what you can do about it and how you can help others. And I think once you learn to recognize those signs,
Yeah.
you can help someone, because very often people who find themselves in these situations, the people around them, the people who should be supporting them, do not realize that they are in an abusive situation.
Yeah. And it's, one of the things I realized, and I kind of want to put it out as a question. Most people who are, what's the word for it, who experience domestic violence, they're very ashamed and very afraid to talk about it, because oftentimes what I read about and when I see it, it seems that it's not the first time, right? It's the first time, it's the second time, it's the third time they haven't talked about it. Well, now a year or two or three or five later, I don't want to talk about it because I should have talked about it a long time ago. So the shame comes, the blame comes, kind of saying, well, it's me, and they're taking on the blame for the other person, which really has nothing to do with them. It has all about to do with the other person, what they're ultimately doing to them.
That's right. Abuse is a choice. Engaging in an abusive behavior is something that the abuser is responsible for and the victim is not. However, victims find themselves in this very difficult situation where people don't necessarily believe what they're saying. They might side with the other person. They might think less of the person who's a victim for tolerating certain behaviors, and they make comments that are hurtful and make the person retreat, like, oh, I wouldn't take any of that, you should leave this person. And that is really, really destructive. I think we need to really learn what to do and what not to do when someone is going through an abuse, or suspect that someone might be in an abuse situation. Listen with an open mind. Let them know that you believe them, that you care, and that you will support them every step of the way.
Yeah, I think that's so important. So, are there if couples are in that exploratory phase, so to speak, and they're starting to realize maybe things don't go so well, are there frameworks? And I've learned through my own marriage therapy that there are certain models, certain frameworks, how people learn to communicate with each other and share things with each other that ultimately can help improve the relationship and the communication levels, et cetera, et cetera. Are there particular things that you would recommend to people, where you say, you know what, here's something that can make the relationship better or can help you improve your communication skills? Are there any particular, I don't know, resources or books or something else besides your own book? Obviously, we're going to talk about that in a second as well. Are there any other resources, any other things that you want to point people to, or kind of let them know, you know what, that's maybe something you want to explore?
Yes, and I can offer your listeners my free resources guide with a list of some of my favorite books on the various
Love it.
subjects that deal with divorce. But I think that, to me, more than the psychological part of it, I think it's the inner work that you have to do. Because ultimately you pick this person and you are interacting with this person in a way that may or may not serve the relationship, and you need to start from where you stand, and then branch out to reaching out to your partner and see how you can merge together and work on the different dynamics, the expectations. Why do you interact the way you do? Is it because of patterns that you have learned in your past relationships, or your parents, or that you have adopted from society? And if you need help, work with a therapist. I'm huge on working with counselors, because they can be a neutral third party to help you discover where you can make certain improvements.
I love that. I think one of the things that was for me initially, one of the biggest and most helpful things was the counseling office was the safe space where it was safe to share, and there was somebody there to mediate when kind of the language was misunderstood or the interpretation was maybe not what the intention of the dialogue was supposed to be. So there was a tremendous resource. I want to take a quick moment, guys. We're talking with Sonia Frontera today. We're talking gray divorce. We're talking adversity and transformation. We're talking about the Catholic guilt feel. And right now we're talking about a subject that I know Sonia is very passionate about and very much cares about, which is domestic violence. I kind of want to punctuate the domestic violence component of our podcast today with some of the things that I know you also are. You have some resources on your website. Tell us the website. So if listeners want to go there, and we're also going to put in the show notes. And we have another really cool thing actually as a giveaway. And I won't say that yet, but Sonia was kind enough to offer that to us. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Again, so there is, I want to kind of summarize those two resources up. The first one was what was it?
The hotline.org.
The hotline.org. My brain's not working today. The hotline.org. And the second one is the free guide right on your website as well?
Yes, that's on my website.
All right.
Which is www.soniafrontera.com.
Exactly as she says it. So it's SONIAFRONTERA.com. Go check it out. And that's also, and we're going to say it at the end again, that's also a way for you to connect with her if there is more that you want to learn from her or work with her or whatever that may be. Now, one of the things that I remember we talked about was negativity is out.
Out.
Negativity is out. Talk to us about that. There's a whole energy for you behind this. So give us a little more on that.
I think one of the worst things that we do is that we don't live in the present moment. And as a recovering catastrophizer, I can just say that, sometimes you get carried away.
Guys, did you hear that? A recovering catastrophizer. I fucking love that. That is so good. I love it. I'm sorry. I had to jump in there.
Yeah, because we are just living a narrative in our heads. We're living in our heads instead of in the present moment. And we are just like regurgitating all these negative beliefs, limiting beliefs, instead of being in the present moment, which is the only opportunity we have to do something about it, right?
Right.
So instead of giving into negativity and catastrophizing and limiting beliefs, just be in the present moment and catch yourself when you're indulging yourself in all these self-destructive behaviors, so that instead you can create the different narrative and build a life that you love.
Yeah. I think it's such a great thing you just said, create a different narrative, right? In neuro-linguistic programming, which is the subconscious and the reframing as well of the story we tell ourselves. And that is, I think, so important. As you said, limiting beliefs, self-sabotage, all the things we do to ourselves. I'm the guy who daily on a multiple time replay goes, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not that enough. And I really have to stop myself. So I'm the recovering, maybe not even fully recovered, not even half recovered. I'm not good enough because my father told me that from an early age on, and that runs the program. And so I think that's such an important piece. Now, we got to talk about that book that's coming out. Tell us about it.
Well, my latest book is called Relationship Solutions: Effective Strategies to Heal Your Heart and Create the Happiness You Deserve.
So that book has been, it's on the market already, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so it's on the market already. So who should pick up that book? Who should read that book? Anybody, who's the perfect, the timing of the book, where you're at in life, when do you pick it up?
Okay, it's funny because I wrote it for people who are unhappily married and are contemplating the divorce decision, right? Because that is a very difficult decision to make.
Right.
But the book covers the full spectrum of divorce or marital unhappiness, from whether you're unhappily married to whether you're going through a divorce or recovering from a divorce. And I have had readers tell me that they think is very appropriate for people who are dating and contemplating marriage, because it makes you ponder those important questions that are going to come up and that are likely to create problems in your relationship, the ones you're currently in and the ones you may have in the future if you're ready recovering from divorce.
You pick up Sonia's book, it'll scare the shit out of you. You'll never get married. You'll never get married again.
No. Don't say that. It's funny because I had a reader who read my first book, Solve the Divorce Dilemma. Do you keep your husband or do you post him on Craigslist? And she wrote to me and said, I was afraid to read the book. I thought it would make me leave my husband, but they got back together and they're stronger than ever. So
I
no,
love it.
yes.
No, I love it. And I got to say, just as a disclaimer, I have not read Sonia's book, Guilty as Charged here. But more importantly, so my comment was just kind of totally off the top. So please, nobody here there a value or anything in regards to Sonia's book. So Sonia, any final thoughts? Let me ask you, can we talk about this, what you graciously offered to our listeners?
Yes.
Why don't you put it out there?
Okay, so I would love to offer to 5 lucky listeners a copy of my book, with the book of their choice. And you can go on my Amazon page and decide which one you prefer. It's Solve the Divorce Dilemma, Relationship Solutions, or Stop the Hurt, my booklet about domestic violence. So reach out to me. The first 5 lucky listeners will get to pick one of the books and I will send it to you.
So that's fantastic. So you don't even have to go through me when you're listening. You go directly to Sonia, but we're going to require a couple of things that they have to say. What are we going to require? They're going to have to make a reference to Grey Divorce. What else?
Domestic violence.
Domestic violence. Anything else?
Catholic divorce guilt.
Catholic divorce guilt. So those 3 keywords, when you reach out to Sonia, you better write them down. You don't just give books away. And obviously the context of Raw Rants needs to be in there.
Absolutely.
And if you're one of the first 5, she has graciously and generously offered 5 books, guys. So this is awesome. Thank you for that. That's so generous.
My pleasure.
In regards to getting in touch with you, if people want to talk to you, is that even in your capacity with all the things you're engaging in, or is just kind of the virtual connect the preferred method right now and then see what happens in the future? Or is there actual opportunity to connect with Sonia directly?
I love to hear from listeners. So you're invited to reach out to me by email at sonia@soniafrontera.com.
That was easy. Sonia@Sonia Frontera, just like the website you got to go to for the other free resources. That's where she virtually lives. Sonia, any final thoughts? Any, in any context, from domestic violence to adversity, transformation, Grey Divorce, whatever that may be, just something that maybe inspires people at the end of the podcast, because we talked about some difficult subjects and most certainly didn't talk enough about it, because that's just the start of the conversation to kind of ignite it, what we did today. But any final thoughts from your side?
To anyone who's hurting in any capacity, and I've been through a number of different adversities in life. Adversity, bad things happen for good reasons. Adversity is fuel for transformation. Take advantage of it, learn your lessons, extract them, and use them to turn your life around. And for those who are contemplating or going through divorce, marital troubles are not the end of the road, but a detour on the road to happiness.
I love that. That's inspiring. Sonia, I want to say thank you. You've been so generous with your time a couple of times now. And when this music plays, that is the title of Out of Time. And that tells us that we're kind of at the end. So please, guys, if you're listening, new friends and old friends, connect with Sonia Frontera at soniafrontera.com, SONIAFRONTERA.com. You find a ton of free resources there. And the 5 listeners who connect with Sonia first and will send her a message wherever you connect with her, if you mention Catholic guilt, you mention Grey Divorce, and you mention domestic violence in the context of Raw Rants, you're one of the first 5. You will get one of her books, and you even get to choose which one of her books you want. I want to once again say thank you to all our old friends and new friends. I'm threatening you. You better hit that subscribe button. Welcome to all the new friends as well. My name is Stefan Thuringer. I'm your host here at Raw Rants. Connect with me on social media as well. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. And if you have any feedback about this episode, or if I can serve and support you in any manner, please let me know as well. I also run a company called the Human Innovation Garage, and we deal with people dynamics, and serving and supporting people, especially today as we are remaking culture in companies. Go check it out at humaninnovationgarage.com. And then Sonia, thank you once again for your generosity, for the time of being with us here today. And again, there's only one thing left for us today, and that is a lot of music. And Sonia and Stefan, and we're out. Carries on to ride, falling into line, and I can see it in